Hello, and welcome to Serious Coin. This is the podcast where we have rich conversations about wealth. Because coming into money is a significant life event, and there is no rule book on how to handle it, and rarely do we talk about it. So, I want to inspire healthy conversations around what it's like to have money. And I want to inspire wealth holders to think about, enjoy, invest, and give away your wealth with greater intention and meaning. That's the path I'm on, and I'm glad to be sharing it with you. So we are back for season 2. And I want to thank everybody for the reviews and their kind words. It's meant so much. And also for the episode ideas that you've sent my way. Because today's topic, in fact, was inspired by a note from a listener. We're going to be talking about how a wealth gap between friends can challenge and sometimes destroy relationships. Oof, this is meaty. And as I did my research for this episode, I talked to a lot of people, all of whom were eager to share their stories with me. And they were stories of feeling awkward or embarrassed, sometimes suspicious, criticized, sometimes taken advantage of, disappointed, or hurt. The feelings really run the gamut when people talk about money and their friendships. There is just so much to unpack on this topic. Fortunately, we have a terrific expert to help us do just that. He is Cockrell, psychotherapist to the uber affluent and founder of Walk and Talk Therapy in New York City. So instead of meeting his clients in an office, Clay takes them on walks around Central Park, conducting therapy sessions on foot. Clearly, his clients are well heeled. I know, I couldn't resist. Clay has 25 years experience in the field after graduating with a master's degree in psychology from the University of Kentucky. And today he's a trusted custodian of the most intimate confessions of billionaires and multi-millionaires. He's been featured by the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the Times of London, and Good Morning America. I really enjoyed my conversation with Clay, and I know that you will too. But first, I wanted to know how he came to this unique style of therapy.
I was born and raised in central Kentucky, eastern central Kentucky, and I went to a small university for undergraduate called Asbury and went to the University of Kentucky for my master's degree, but always wanted to come to New York. So my girlfriend and now wife and I came up here in 1997, and I had a couple of different jobs here and there and decided to start my practice of psychotherapy. And it was okay, but there's a lot of therapists in, in Manhattan. So my wife and I came up with this idea. She really was her idea to walk with my clients. And so I started Walk and Talk. And I've met clients at down in Battery Park, mostly Central Park, and we would walk for the session. And somehow the Wall Street Journal found out about it and thought it was cool. And the producers of Good Morning America read the article. And then all of a sudden, I'm walking through Central Park with Choo Choo Chang, and boom, I had a successful practice, and it's been nonstop since then.
You and Steve Jobs, I mean, he would walk a lot, right? He felt his most creative thinking was when he was walking, and if he had difficult conversations to have with executives, or he would have walking meetings.
hmm
Is there something different that you've experienced in terms of walking versus being in an office in the traditional therapist setting?
Oh my God, everything. Well, first of all, you're doing something, and I like to say there are
Mm.
shower people and there are bath people, and bath people I just don't understand because you're just kind of sitting in your own filth. and,
Except when you're
and
sick, and it's
yeah,
really, really comforting.
yeah, like totally. That's true. That's true. But I always thought your traditional therapy, you're just kind of sitting in it. You're just, blah. But there is this metaphor. You're moving your body. You're moving through space, and I think it opens things up. You begin to thinking outside the box, and there's a wonderful ability then for the therapist to create this rapport with just the rhythm of the walking. Because we're in this together,
Mm.
side by side, and especially for men, I think men have a hard time sitting, making eye contact, talking about very personal things. And here there's, we glance at each other side by side, but really it's more open space that you're able to open up. And so, but I get my steps in.
For sure. Different people have told me with their teenage kids, when they needed to have conversations, they'd often take them on a drive because they're sitting side by side moving forward, and there isn't that sense of confrontation. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I get that. Um, is there a you mentioned, particularly men, but what's the balance of men and women in your practice?
Interesting. I have more men than I think the typical therapist. And there are, in my field, more female therapists than male. So I think that that's an attraction. I would say maybe right now 70%, maybe a little higher, are men.
And are the issues people are dealing with directly related to the fact that they're wealthy, or are they your garden variety problems that everybody has?
That's a great question because both. Some people come to me because how money is complicating their life, how it is, just that complicating their life. It's a money issue. But some wealthy people come to me because they're struggling with depression or time management or anxiety. And they come to me because they know I am familiar with their world.
I mean, you are working with the most rarefied wealth strata in the city with the highest population of rich people on the planet, quite literally. Um, and you are privy to their most innermost thoughts and feelings.
Yes.
Is there a common theme or themes that you see that runs through the practice besides, say, the number of comments on their net worth statement?
Yes. There is a lot of isolation. There is a lot of awareness that money can be toxic and it complicates your life. There is some degree of guilt, some degree of shame, but I think a lot of the clients that I see come to me because I understand and I don't bring judgment. There was a woman who came to me, and her previous therapist could not understand why her complaint was their husband was only giving her, I think it was $40,000 a month to manage the home, and he was bringing in 200 million a year. And the previous therapist just, you should be happy with that. That's a lot of money. And I said, no, you should not be happy with that. That's not enough to handle, 5 households, kids in college, multiple staff. So to say a problem is a problem, even if not a lot of people have that problem, it's still a problem for you. So I think people are coming to me because of that lack of negative judgment to them.
Hmm.
Money's hard to talk about, and I've learned how to make it easy.
You mentioned toxic. That is such a powerful word. What do you mean by toxic? How is that manifest?
Well, like I said, it can isolate you. It makes you suspicious
Mm.
of others who are coming into your life. There's envy. There's jealousy. There, the old saying, "More money, more problems." There are different types of problems that maybe someone of middle income has, but they're still pretty big. And um, for some reason, I can talk on this for forever. The toxicity of money is just profound. It's dangerous. People die because they don't know how to handle their wealth. Drugs get involved, suicide because of lack of contact with other people, and multiple other reasons. This money can be dangerous, and it's the toxicity is coming to a place where it is removing you from, I don't like this word, but normal life,
Mhm, mhm.
right? You're not having contact with people that are having commonality.
So is there a fix do you advise your clients to seek out opportunities to have interaction with normal life, or how are you helping them address that isolation?
Well, I've got this concept that I'm fascinated by: private versus secret.
Mm,
Secret is dirty. It's dirty. It's dark. Private is clean. It's appropriate. There are some things that should be private, But when we try to downplay our wealth, try to make people not know about it, we don't feel comfortable with it ourselves, it becomes this secret thing. And I work with them to kind of know the difference that when you get comfortable with your bank account and your money and your resources, other people are going to get comfortable with it. So, yes, I work with them to kind of have the courage to go out and make those friendships, allow those people to come into their lives that maybe new.
There's so much in that, and I can't I'm loving that we can jump into this, and you've mentioned some of the things I do wanna touch on, like suspicion, jealousy, and this notion of secret and hiding, because in preparing for this episode, I talked to a number of people, some in family offices, some friends of mine, and everybody had a story to tell. Some people had questions they want me to ask you, so I have to remember to do that.
Okay.
Um, but it really strikes a nerve. And so let's jump into that. I want to cover a number of these different angles. Maybe I'll start with a statistic. You've kind of touched on it, but I read something online, so I can't attest to the validity, but 39% of people with a lot of money confess to letting a friendship go because their lifestyles became incompatible because of that wealth gap. And it wasn't so much that a rift occurred, oh, that might have been the case, more that a drift occurred. And that over time, you actually are no longer Jenny from the block. You have new experiences, you're meeting new people, you make new friends who can afford to do the things you like to do the way you like to do them, and old friendships often fade away. So that sounds like from what you're saying is one scenario that you must see in your practice, and are clients pained by that?
Absolutely. And that's where I come back to this toxicity. It changes a person. Um, it's important to talk about these things to with your friends who may not have the same level of wealth. Because the danger here is that you're only going to associate yourselves with other wealthy people because it's easier. You can split the check at per se.
Yeah.
You can go on private flights. You can take the middle of the day where everyone else has a job and they work. They can go golfing, whatever. So it's important not to get isolated in this very small bubble of other wealthy people. We're all drawn to people who are similar to us, but that makes us very vanilla.
Sure. That's
we,
human nature.
yes, absolutely. So the key then is that you're going to have to bring this up with your friend who does not have as much money and say, look, here's a situation. This complicates our relationship. And I think that we should talk about that. And it's awkward. There's nothing more awkward in the world to talk about money, but you have to. And I've seen this just bring so much relief to this friendship because they say, thank God, I didn't know how to bring this up. I didn't know how to ask the question. There's this relief. Now we
Right.
have a dialogue. Now we can talk about it and create some kind of boundaries around the money. And one of the things that you learn as a new therapist, this phrase of you cannot change or be responsible for another person's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. They're going to have their own journey toward money with envy, with jealousy. Your job is to show up and be authentic, to be honest, to create the dialogue. It's not a secret. They know you have money. So let's talk about that and how are we going to navigate this situation.
So much in that I I want to address. Maybe let's talk about envy then. I read something, the writer Gore Vidal said that every time a friend succeeds, a little something in me dies. That is honest,
Yeah,
but quite horrible.
yeah.
And from what you're saying, fairly common. So, can you talk a bit about envy as a thing? It's one of the seven deadly sins. It's obviously a part of human beings, something that
Mhm.
people have to rail against. But how do you understand it? How do you identify it? What are your thoughts on envy?
I think The love songs say that love is the most powerful emotion in the world, but they're wrong. It's envy. And it's natural. It's normal. I mean, in the 10 commandments, the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, because it's really bad for you. We want to succeed. We want things.
Can I just interrupt? I think you said something very important there. It's
Yeah.
bad for you
Yes.
doing the envy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's bad for you. It's looking at your lack of something, looking at someone else having it, and you want it, and you're working so hard for it. So there is this, I want this thing. This thing belongs to somebody else. I feel bad that that person has it and I don't. That's a normal human emotion. We just want to not feed that emotion because it's bad for us, and it complicates relationships.
And couldn't it also be reframed that, look, this person is an example of the success I'm trying to create in my own life? It can be done. And I really like this person. This is a friend of mine. I'm happy for this person that this has occurred. I think there's a difference between this person getting something that one might want and being happy for them.
Mhm.
And as Gore Vidal suggests, this person getting something you want and not being happy for them.
Right.
There's kind of, for me, there's like good envy and bad envy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I work with my clients to understand the power and the impact of others' envy toward them. It's not something they did wrong, but be aware. That's why I keep talking about this toxicity of it, because be aware of how this is impacting other people. It's normal for people to feel jealousy and envy, and hopefully they're trying to fight that. But to talk about the wealth, to have that open friendship, to have a dialogue about it is really hard, but it's really important to do that. But it's more important for you to be aware. I mean, there's a lot of advantages in a wealthy person's life, a lot of advantages, but there are difficulties in how they interact with the world, and you have to be aware of that.
I think that's a really good observation. I'll tell you, it speaks to me because, of course, I married someone who is wealthy. I've stepped into a lifestyle. It's not even my wealth. Um, and I think, speaking for myself, you still feel the same. And I would certainly, if you're not someone who experiences a lot of envy yourself, and I've never really been prone to that, then you slow to recognize it in others.
Yes,
And
yes,
other family office advisors and therapists have said, not all your friends are going to be happy for you. Some are quietly going to resent you. Some may make passive aggressive comments. Others may silently pray for your downfall. I think this is probably what you're getting at, that people of wealth sometimes experience and are sometimes the target of hurtful comments from erstwhile friends.
absolutely. And I work with my clients to understand the people you interact with are human, and that means they're imperfect, and they're going to have ugly emotions about you. It's not your fault. You don't need to necessarily remove them from your life. Understand that they're struggling.
Yeah.
You have your own struggles, they have theirs. And it's about that awareness.
And I would say it sounds like some generosity of spirit, some compassion, empathy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowing that you have this impact on people and just embrace their imperfection. So they're jealous. So they are envious. And okay, those are ugly emotions,
Yep.
but you have ugly emotions too. You've decided to have a friendship with a human. So it's accepting the imperfection of others.
And really, it might seem bizarre, but even among the super rich, there are gaping disparities.
Yes.
Just looking at the numbers. So there's something like 300,000 people globally that have a net worth of over $30 million. And of that very small group of people, there are something like 2,700 billionaires. So if you put somebody with $200 million net worth, which I think by pretty much everybody's standard is fantastically wealthy,
Mhm.
besides someone with 40 billion, there's always somebody with a bigger private jet or a lifestyle that maybe you aspire to and cannot support. Other than one guy, somebody always has more.
Right. And so then you can kind of identify with that emotion in others. But, they say comparison is the key to unhappiness.
Absolutely. And why is it we always compare up? You
Right.
know, you're always, you know, measuring up.
Yeah, true.
Um, but switching the lens then to the person on the other side of the wealth gap, and you talked a bit, about the feelings they might be having, but sometimes hurt and disappointment, not even envy or jealousy. If there's a drift, that person's thinking, "Look, we went to high school together, and I haven't changed. I'm still here. I still care about you. I still enjoy doing the things that we used to do. It's you that's changed."
Yeah.
How does somebody navigate that?
Well, they take it in, and probably it's true. We all should be changing. And if somebody feels hurt by your actions, own it. Like, yeah, you're right. This is hard. It's hard to explain why it's hard because it sounds awful sometimes. But having money is hard, and I'm trying to navigate this world. Sometimes when somebody comes to you and says something like that, you just, yeah, you're right. My bad. I'm sorry. How do we repair this? Because this relationship is important. You grew up with me. You saw me go through acne. I don't want to lose somebody so important to me. So now all of a sudden we have a dialogue. Somebody came to you and said, I'm hurt and I don't like what this has done to us. As hard as that is, take it in, own it, and say, yeah, all right, now we can talk about it. It's all about just talking about it.
So many of these things just come down to communication, and that it takes a lot of courage and maybe the right words or the right way to approach it. And I think you've given some good kind of conversation starters and some language around that. Um, I mean, let's flip then to a more positive, and that is generosity and doing things for your friends. Did you ever watch the series Billions?
No, no, I didn't.
Well, it's about a hedge fund manager in New York. Well, I guess it's Connecticut, but Bobby Axelrod, played by Damian Lewis, he grew up poor, and in this particular episode, I'm thinking of he took all of his high school friends from the old neighborhood to a Metallica concert. And this time, of course, they flew by private jet, and he arranged for them to go backstage and meet the band. And there's this one scene that I just thought was so authentic. They walk in to where the band is going to be rehearsing, and he's got this swagger and this pride and this joy
Yeah.
at being able to do this for his high school friends, and they are suitably impressed and excited. And it strikes me that is one of the great joys of prosperity, being able to do things with and for your family and friends. But in doing so, doesn't it often upset the ecosystem of that friendship, the dynamic?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it you're right. It's the fun part of having wealth is to be able to share, to give gifts, to go on these wonderful trips. Um, and it does impact the receiver because they can take it as you're rubbing my face in your wealth. But if you show up with authenticity, I'm not here to show off. I'm here to celebrate with you, to experience this with you. It's really about how the giver is approaching the gift. But also, again, I keep coming back, be aware. It can be overwhelming. As wonderful as this is, it can be overwhelming to another person. I had a client who had a lot of money, and he made it on his own, and he gave his father this rare Mercedes, I think it was, and it was too much. It was like this is too much for him. So be aware of the impact it's going to be on when you give large gifts to family, to friends, and yeah, it's just about the awareness of it. It can be a little overwhelming.
And it's be aware, I guess, of what your intent is. Because if you are looking for some great reaction, you might not get it. Or the reaction might be, I guess, as you're saying, different than what you expect.
Absolutely. Again, being aware of the impact of your wealth on others. Let them have their own journey. You're not going to be able to control it. Perhaps they're going to be jealous. They're, again, a human. But if this is a friendship, you want to talk about it. You want to say, pull them aside and said, I felt like maybe there was something off during that, Metallica concert. Did I do something to upset you? Was that too much? Um, Show up authentically. Talk about the things. Unfortunately, you're going to have to be the adult sometimes and bring this up, and give them a chance to have a dialogue because that's what friendship is, right?
Hmm. I mentioned that this episode was inspired by a listener who asked me to do a segment on friendships and wealth. And I got a note from this listener that went on to say, I have had a couple of friendships flounder because I think people expect me to look after them. The money and the generosity has devolved to general care without thought as to how the friend can make a non monetary difference in my life, say by inviting me to dinner or buying me a small treat. That's a quote from the note.
Hmm.
Obviously, this person's generosity, they feel like they're being taken advantage of or maybe giving too much. That also to me sounds quite common.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People feel taken advantage of, expected to pick up the check. And that's where I work with my clients to create this conversation to this doesn't feel good. I realize I've got a lot of money. I can pick up the check every time, but it doesn't feel good. And I also work with them to kind of have rules of the road. What are your rules about money and friendship? They should be golden rules of these are not broken. Like I don't give money away, or if I do, it's going to be a loan with some kind of percentage to it. If I'm going to pick up the check, I'll say, okay, you get the next time. It's creating some guidelines of how you want to interact with your wealth, how you're going to interact with and make that known to other people. So that makes it easier for you. It makes it easier for them. But also, saying I want reciprocity, which can be hard. I keep thinking of this clip, I guess, because the Queen died recently, and I saw this clip of Catherine Middleton, who said her first Christmas at Sandringham, she said, "What do you get the Queen?"
Mm.
So she thought of what she would get for her own grandmother, and that was homemade jams. So she got this family recipe of jams, decorated it nice, and the Queen loved it. That was something personal, wasn't a lot of money. So people can participate in giving and a relationship with a person of great wealth. You just have to do it within your means. But the person of great wealth needs to explain this is an important part of friendship, and this bothers me because we all want investment from our friendships. It feels good for somebody to give us something to pick up the check every once in a while. It feels like we're being taken care of and that we're important. So if you're not feeling important, you need to keep coming back to communication and talk about it.
I think it's difficult to do full stop, but it's probably a little bit easier to do when the friendships are really important, maybe long standing. If
Hmm.
it's more of a superficial friendship, I could totally see someone not having the courage to have that conversation and maybe just quietly letting the friendship go, as clearly many have done, or putting their own boundaries around it without actually telling the other person.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier to have these very difficult conversations with childhood friends, but it's also really important somebody new in your life to set up some expectations of what this relationship is. Because all of a sudden you're friends with somebody for 5 years and you've been picking up the check. How do you break that habit?
I love the Catherine Middleton example. I think it's the thoughtfulness. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think a lot of wealthy people would appreciate that even more. Nobody wants someone else to go out and respond in a outlandish way that is not consistent with their means.
Right.
If you're doing something right, so it's the thoughtfulness that means so much more.
Yes. And I think that as wealthy people, uh, they need to understand that thoughtfulness needs to go both ways. That a small gift can be just as impactful than the backstage concert tour because it's meaningful.
Also, the notion of being comfortable um, with your wealth. In season one, I interviewed Maury Tawes, who's a very successful self made real estate financier and now vintner. And he says he grew up poor and still hangs out with all of his high school friends. And they have not had the level of success that he has, but he takes them on golfing junkets and out to dinner and pays for the hockey team's equipment and so on. And it prompted me to ask him, like, do your friends have they started to expect that you'd pay? And he said he sort of said, "Well, of course they expect me to pay and I expect to pay and I'm okay with that."
Yes,
And I thought that is someone who has gotten very comfortable in his own skin and with his level of success.
absolutely.
There was no artifice.
Absolutely. And that's the goal here of working with these people is to get them comfortable and that they can, come to their own relationship with their own bank account. This is good. I'm going to accept that it's good. I'm okay with paying, or hey, I'm not. So I'm going to create some guidelines around this. But yeah, you want this authentic, joyful, this is who I am. Because when you get comfortable with it, you own it, everybody else is going to get comfortable with it too.
So if someone's listening to this and they're not at that stage just yet, are there any self-reflective questions or exercises or thoughts that you could give them to point them on that path?
Yeah, I think that it's looking inward and first asking what's your history with money? What's your story? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it shameful? Because people are going to pick up on that. Um, how have you seen people interact with you and react to your wealth?
Hmm.
What are you contributing to that? Um, we generally get the concept of wealth and money from our parents, which brings up an idea that I find fascinating. There's a real difference in the clients that I see. Two buckets, if you will. It's newly wealthy, self-made people, lottery winners, married into wealth, etc., and generational wealth, wealth that it's been around for, they grew up in it, right? So the people who grew up in it, there's a vocabulary, there is expectations. They know how to act. They know it hopefully their family is talking about what this means. So the newly wealthy, they are fish out of water. They they're thrown into this new world. They don't know the rules. They don't know the vocabulary. They're going to mess up. They're going to insult people. They're going to their families all going to get really struggling with what this means. So it's two different worlds. A lot of common problems, but a lot of distinct problems too.
That is why I have this podcast. As I've often said, there's no rule book for wealth. And particularly, as you say, people, there's lots of issues around wealth, but people coming into wealth for the first time, sometimes somewhat suddenly, although it may be a 28-year overnight success, through a liquidity event. Um, you're trying to navigate. On a one hand, nothing's changed because you still feel like yourself. On the other hand, everything's changed and it's trying to marry the two. And everybody else seems to know, as you say, how to deal with wealth. And you've got to figure it out on your own. And there isn't a lot of help.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating what you're doing here because if I understand your story, you married into wealth, right?
Yep.
And you're like, this world is really interesting and kind of crazy. I want to talk about it. I'm going to put a podcast together. And people generally in this world, they don't talk about it. So here's an outsider going, this is really interesting. I want to learn more about it. And that's so healthy. And I'm so glad this is a resource for people because there needs to be conversation about it. And sometimes it's the outsider that comes in and goes, "Whoa, this is different," and brings a degree of healthiness to it because we're going to talk about
And I had been around it my whole career because I worked in wealth management. I worked with wealthy people every day. I grew up modestly affluent, but when it happens to you, it becomes very personal.
it. Yes,
It isn't until you are in that situation that your perspective changes.
absolutely.
You mentioned loaning money to friends very briefly, and it reminds me of a quote that I heard Chris Rock say one time that people were coming up to him asking him for $10,000 the way they asked him, "What time is it?" How do you help people navigate that? Everybody with their hand out.
Oh, well, it goes back to having your golden rules here. Set them up. You can break them, but you need to have them. And to have kind of a few sentences in your back pocket that because it's always surprising that somebody, a family member, staff, somebody, it always comes in this surprising moment. And it's good to have some phrases in your back pocket of, "Hey, look, I appreciate it. I'm so glad that you feel comfortable in asking for that, but I've got a couple of rules around that. So maybe let's have a conversation about what's going on for you, but I don't do that. Or if whatever your rule is, I can do that, but here's how I like to approach situations like this. I've had to, and say I've had to over the years come up with some guidelines, and so this has helped me navigate this, and hopefully it's going to help us because this can be really complicated when money comes into a friendship. And here's this too: if you can keep money out of your friendship. That's hard when you've got a lot of it. But if you can keep money out of your friendship, do it.
You mentioned it earlier that a lot of people try to downplay their wealth. Secret was a word, I think. And I know that you say it's unhealthy, but you also have to admire people. When I was working in the wealth management business, very often people would call us up and say, "Look, I've come into this money through an inheritance or a liquidity event, and we don't want this money to change us.
Mhm.
We don't want it to change our family, our value, our kids. We don't even want our kids to know about it or our community." That must also be something that you hear from time to time?
All the time. And it's smart. It's smart to know this is, I keep coming back to this word. It's dangerous. This is something that I need to think through with help because I know that this can change us. The downplaying of it, though, it comes across as false.
Mm,
People know. Come on, people are going to know. So
mhm.
you all shucks and downplaying it just makes you inauthentic.
Right.
I think so, and people can pick up on that. So own it. This is happening, and that makes everybody else much more comfortable.
And it's that balance between not wanting to be inauthentic and also not wanting to be oblivious or insensitive as to how some things might sound to somebody else
Absolutely,
in terms of how what you're doing, where you're going, how you're traveling.
yes. There is a degree of a little bit of censoring sometimes.
Hmm.
Maybe, and you have to judge that on what you feel comfortable with. But yeah, it's being aware, as I say, of this. This is impactful to other people. It brings up negative human emotions in other people. So you just want to be aware. It's this wonderful dance of being authentic and being open and kind of being aware of the impact of that. And that goes back to secret versus private. There are some things that it's appropriate to be private about.
I love that. I'm going to remember that secret or private. Is there anything else you want to offer on this subject before we jump into the last rapid fire questions for you.
One of the things I think you mentioned was the mistrust of new people,
Mm.
and I hear that a lot. Of is this person being my friend coming into my life because they want something? There's no way to know. Bottom line, maybe, maybe, but that's true for all of us. You know, if you have wealth or not wealth, why is this person being nice to me? Why is this friendship happening? There is that suspicion that I work with my clients to fight against, because hopefully maybe that is the case. They are motivated to your fame, you're interesting, you've got a lot of money. People are drawn to that, but hopefully the friendship will develop into something deeper, because again, people are human. Those are ugly emotions, but that doesn't make them terribly bad people. It just makes them human. And hopefully, this friendship will then develop into, as you put boundaries around it and guidelines and your rules about friendship and money, maybe this will develop into something deeper and more real.
Is there such a thing as healthy suspicion, though?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. But then it goes into paranoia, and this person is nice to me. So it's a continuum. Yes, there is healthy suspicion because of what you have.
Some people develop vetting systems for trying to determine those things. Maybe not always accurate, but someone was telling me about a young man who from a very wealthy family and asks if he has people over, asks them to bring beer because all of his friends can afford beer. And if they balk or don't bring it or say, no, I'll drink yours, that's a red flag that I might
Yeah.
be dealing with here with a hanger on or a user. So,
Hmm.
what do you think of that? Is that
Yeah, that's a great idea. I might steal that one. That's it's good to have these little things set up for yourself. But on the other end of it, I had someone say, I live in a bubble. Nobody can reach me. I have set up so many layers of staff and chief of staff and assistants that nobody can reach me. I went, "Ugh, that doesn't sound healthy." I mean, it sounds protective, and absolutely, and some people absolutely have to live like that. But there's got to be some kind of cracks that people can come into your life.
all right. So, before we close, if you're okay with that, then I just want to ask you a few questions about how you view money in your life. If you just finish the sentence, to me, money is.
Complicated and work. It's work. I know I shouldn't add more, but just like it's hard to manage, to budget, to go, where's this going and where's that going, and yeah, so I complicated.
Mhm. Who is someone that you admire for their relationship with their own wealth, for how they deal with who do you look to as being very healthy?
Notice the pause.
That's why you're in business.
uh, yes. Um, First one that comes to mind is Oprah. I think that she has not let it define her, but she's enjoying the hell out of it, and she is, maintaining friendships with wealthy and non-wealthy people, and yeah, Oprah comes to mind.
Do you have a guilty pleasure when it comes to spending? Is there something that you typically like to splurge on yourself?
Vintage clothes, like nice designer vintage clothes. I've got a weakness for. First of all, I'm 6'4", so they're hard to find because they didn't grow them as big as I am back then.
Back then.
But yes, vintage clothes.
And what about the reverse? Is there something you consistently cheap out on where you underspend relative to your means?
No. I like I just know. I like quality things. I like good shoes. I like a nice steak. If I'm going to the grocery, I look for the nicest whatever.
The
The
ribeye.
ribeye, absolutely. Life is too short. I enjoy it.
I love that, thank you. Any final thoughts about money you wanna leave us with?
There's a lot of people out there that have wonderful relationships with money, and I get to talk with the people that are struggling. So I acknowledge that my views are skewed. Um, Nobody ever sets up an emergency session with me because they're having a great day. I talk with people who are who are struggling, who are having a hard time, who are lost, and so I acknowledge that I don't get to see a lot of the healthy people, But those that are struggling, I want them to know this is a learnable skill. There are ways to protect yourself, to help your kids. And we didn't even really talk about the kids. I mean, we've got to be so careful with how money is impacting children. Um, but there are ways to do this. It's just you got to be intentional about it and think it through. You cannot go on autopilot. You cannot just be quiet and hope. That doesn't work.
I am so grateful to Clay for being my guest. I just love how easily and openly he approaches these really challenging conversations. And he just normalizes what a lot of us avoid. If you want to explore any of these issues with Clay, you can reach him through his website, walkandtalk.com. And you should also know that he's working on the development of the Scary Money podcast, in which he'll explore the impact of wealth on mental health. And that's due to launch in early 2023, and I'll be looking for that for sure. So thank you for listening. If you want to hear more rich conversations about wealth, make sure you subscribe to Serious Coin on your podcast app of choice so you don't miss any content. Thanks again for listening. Serious Coin podcast is provided for your general interest only, and nothing we discuss should be taken as investment, tax, legal, or other professional advice. Always talk to a licensed professional before you take any financial decisions.